In Episode 2, titled Essential Terms, Plain Language Glossary, we focus on the vocabulary that anchors every conversation about the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, or FedRAMP. Clear terms prevent confusion, especially when multiple agencies, contractors, and assessors work together across long timelines. This glossary is not just a list of jargon to memorize. It is a set of working definitions that translate policy and procedure into everyday professional speech. Each term carries its own story, reflecting how the program's structure and documentation evolved. As you move through this episode, think of these definitions as the scaffolding that supports later detail. Once the language becomes comfortable, the process will read as far less cryptic and much more logical. The program name itself, FedRAMP, stands for the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. It exists to standardize how cloud services are assessed and approved for use by federal agencies. Before its creation, each agency conducted its own assessments using varying standards and tools, often redoing the same work already performed elsewhere. FedRAMP solved that inefficiency by establishing a single baseline, a shared documentation format, and a public marketplace where approved services appear. In practice, it functions as the federal government's central mechanism for verifying that cloud solutions meet the minimum security requirements defined by federal policy. The outcome is greater consistency, reduced duplication, and a faster path to adoption for vendors that can demonstrate maturity. Authorization to operate, written as ATO, is the official decision from a federal agency that allows a cloud service to run within its environment. The ATO represents risk acceptance. The agency's authorizing official confirms that the system's controls have been tested and found adequate for the intended use. Each ATO is bounded by the specific system description in the system security plan, and it usually includes any conditions or residual risks accepted by the agency. An ATO is not permanent. It lives alongside continuous monitoring obligations. When an assessor refers to maintaining the ATO, they mean staying compliant with the controls and reporting cadence required to keep that authorization valid. A related but distinct term is PATO, short for Provisional Authorization to Operate. This authorization is issued by the Joint Authorization Board, or JAB, rather than by a single agency. A PATO signals that the JAB has reviewed the security package and granted a conditional green light that other agencies may reuse. It does not guarantee acceptance, but it dramatically lowers the effort needed for reuse because much of the security due diligence is already complete. In the marketplace, a PATO often serves as a badge of wide applicability and readiness. For many cloud providers, achieving that provisional authorization opens doors across the government because agencies can inherit the JAB's confidence rather than redoing the same evaluation. The third-party assessment organization, known as a 3PAO, is the independent assessor that verifies the accuracy and completeness of a cloud provider's implementation. The 3PAO role sits at the core of the FedRAMP trust model, providing objective evidence that the stated controls exist and operate effectively. To perform these assessments, the organization itself must be accredited to rigorous standards, ensuring competence and independence. During an engagement, a 3PO conducts interviews, reviews configurations, runs tests, and documents findings that form the backbone of the security assessment report. Their perspective is factual and evidence-based. They do not authorize, but they shape the quality and credibility of what the authorizing officials later decide. Another essential figure in the ecosystem is the authorizing official, abbreviated as AO after first use. The AO represents the federal agency responsible for accepting the risk of operating the system. In practice, this is a senior executive empowered to make security decisions that balance mission need and residual risk. The AO reviews the full security package, the system security plan, the security assessment report, and the plan of action and milestones to decide whether the risk level is acceptable. The AO's signature on the ATO letter transforms assessment results into an operational reality. This role demands judgment, not just checklist compliance, and its weight explains why documentation precision matters so much in the FedRAMP world. The System Security Plan, or SSP, is the central narrative document describing how the system is built, how it is secured, and which controls are implemented. Think of it as the autobiography of the environment. It explains boundaries, configurations, data flows, and responsibilities. The SSP is both a living technical manual and a formal artifact for assessment. A well-written plan reads coherently, allowing reviewers to visualize the system without needing a tour. It names every control family, ties each to responsible parties, and links inherited protections from hosting platforms or managed services. Because every other document references the SSP, its clarity determines how smoothly the assessment proceeds. Complementing the SSP is the Security Assessment Report, or SAR, produced by the 3PAO after testing and evaluation. The SAR details which controls were examined, how they were tested, what evidence was reviewed, and what results were observed. It translates technical testing into formal findings, labeling each as passed, partially implemented, or failed. Beyond results, the SAR includes context explaining the severity of each weakness and the potential impact if left unaddressed. For agencies, it is the diagnostic report that informs risk acceptance. For the cloud provider, it is the mirror reflecting strengths and shortfalls to be corrected through the remediation process captured in the next artifact. The plan of action and milestones, written as POA&M, is the program's formal mechanism for tracking and resolving identified weaknesses. Each entry lists the issue, the control reference, the responsible owner, planned remediation actions, and expected completion dates. The document also records progress updates and closure evidence, creating accountability and transparency over time. A clean, current POA&M tells reviewers that issues are managed, not ignored. When the program matures, teams treat it as an operational planning tool rather than a burden, integrating it with internal ticketing systems so updates flow automatically and the record stays live. This transparency builds trust with authorizing officials who must see evidence of sustained correction, not just promises. The term boundary refers to the precise scope of systems, services, and data flows included in the assessment. Drawing this boundary accurately is one of the hardest and most consequential early tasks. It determines which components fall under FedRAMP control requirements and which remain external or inherited. An overbroad boundary inflates cost and complexity. An overly narrow one omits dependencies and leads to findings. A well-drawn boundary balances completeness and manageability, often visualized in the SSP diagrams that show trust zones, data stores, and communication paths. In assessment discussions, the phrase "inside the boundary" carries real weight. It signals where accountability begins and ends. Inheritance describes the reuse of security controls already implemented and assessed by another authorized system or service. For example, a software-as-a-service product hosted on an authorized infrastructure provider can inherit certain physical, network, and platform controls rather than implementing them again. This mechanism reduces duplication and emphasizes shared responsibility across the cloud stack. However, inheritance requires traceability. The inherited provider must have a current authorization, and the inheriting system must use those controls as designed. Documenting this linkage in the SSP and the SAR ensures clarity for reviewers and prevents gaps where both sides assumed the other was covering the same control. The Federal Information Processing Standard 199, or FIPS 199, provides the framework for categorizing a system's impact levels in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These categories, low, moderate, or high, define the baseline of controls required under FedRAMP. A system handling public data might be categorized as low, while one processing sensitive mission data could be moderate or high. Getting this classification right is essential because it dictates which control baseline applies, how strict testing will be, and what level of continuous monitoring is expected. Agencies and cloud providers alike rely on FIPS 199 to calibrate expectations and resources, ensuring proportional protection. Another modern element in the program's evolution is OSCAL, the Open Security Controls Assessment Language. OSCAL provides a machine-readable format for FedRAMP documentation, turning what was once static text into structured data. With OSCL, systems can automate portions of document generation, comparison, and validation. For instance, an assessor can import a standardized SSP model populated with actual configurations and output a consistent package ready for review. Over time, this approach aims to reduce human error, accelerate review cycles, and enable continuous authorization models. While still maturing, OSCL represents the program's move toward automation and interoperability, reflecting broader trends in digital compliance. Repetition cements understanding, and the close of this glossary invites a quick mental recap. You now know that FedRAMP standardizes federal cloud approvals. An ATO is the agency's permission to operate. A PATO is the JAB's provisional approval for reuse. The three PAO and AO carry distinct but complementary roles, and the SSP, SAR, and POA&M form the core documentation suite. Boundary and inheritance shape scope. FIPS 190 sets the impact level, and OSCL defines the digital format connecting it all. To make these terms second nature, say them aloud, explain them to a peer, and then define three in your own words without notes. When vocabulary becomes fluent, collaboration flows, and every subsequent phase of the FedRAMP journey becomes markedly easier to navigate. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.